welcome back to John's Workshop, and in this video we're going to go back onto the shaper rebuild. I'm really trying to get this over the line now, so this is part 7, and in this part we are going to be dealing with the cross slide feed mechanism and also the ram. So two quite fundamental pieces of the jigsaw puzzle, and we're going to be basically stripping them down, cleaning them, repairing any bad bits, prepping them, painting them, and finally rebuilding them back onto the machine. So without any more waffling, let's crack on. Okay, so here's the cross slide feed mechanism. I've already took the liberty of taking that apart and stripping it down and getting the worst of the muck out. So largely it's two castings, aluminium castings, and sat within that is this gear that drives the cross slide, and also this sort of half gear ratchet affair. And what that works on is at the bottom of the unit, you'll see here there's this cam mechanism, and that's changed direction with the lever on the back here. So that's to change the direction of the feed of the axis as it moves across, and then the pointy bits here and here, pointy bits, that's a very good engineering term, but you know what I mean, on this unit at the bottom here is what actually engages with that ratchet gear and moves, this whole unit moves sort of round like this with each stroke of the ram, which then turns the gear, and that increases the feed and makes the table move across. So this was full of grease and muck. We've just wiped the worst out. So first job now, we're going to get this little handle off. I think that's probably as far as I'm going to go in terms of strip down. Everything else can stay in, and then we're going to attack the paint. Usual thing, this horrible grey paint is just all peeling off, as it has been everywhere else on the machine. So we'll attack that with a wire brush, and the other half of the casting, very similar state, nothing more to strip off that. So we're just going to blast away at this old paint and get them both cleaned up. I'll not show you that, nothing exciting. What I'll do is bring you back once we've got that done, and we're probably prepping for paint or something, and show you a couple of stills of that. Okay, so that's got done with the ratchet mechanism. So we've cleaned all of the aluminium castings up, got all the paint off, a bit fiddly in some of the tight places, but all done. Still to clean up all the small pieces, small parts, so we've got those all in there. So what we're going to do now is put all of that to one side and start on the ram next. Because I'm going to be painting these two and the ram all at the same time, we'll get the ram stripped down next, so that when we're painting we're just doing it all at once. So I'll bring you back when we've got the ram on the bench and we're having a good look at it and starting to strip it down. Okay, so here's our ram as it came off the machine, with the adjuster bolt on the top and the pointer that lines up with the scale on the other side that you can't see. So I've not touched this since I disassembled it. We've got the mechanism that sits underneath it here, so another whacking great big bronze casting, again full of grease, full of swarf, as you can see. And we've also got the gear that sits onto that shaft at the back here that meshes with the adjustment. So there's two bevel gears that sit in there that drives this lead screw to alter the position of the stroke. So you'll also see we've got the down feed slide, whatever its proper name is, tool slide probably. That's not going to be in scope for this particular video, so I'm going to take, the first job is to get that off. We'll put that up on the bench and we'll be dealing with that separately. We're just going to focus in on the ram itself, the adjuster, the fastener here, and the attachment pieces, the lead screw, lead nut and bevel gear. So I'll bring you back. I'm going to get this tool slide off the front first, a couple of bolts to remove that, and then I'll give this a bit of a overall clean up, get rid of all the swarf and muck, see what we're dealing with, and then I'll crack on with paint removal. So I'll bring you back just before we start on the paint, just to show you the state of the slideways. Okay, so we've done a bit of rudimentary cleanup, just giving these slideways on the underside of the ram a light rub, and there's not really any damage. There's some minor scratching here and there, and it is minor. There's a casting defect there which is subsurface, so that will just hold oil, and there's some staining here which is, I think, the edge of the length of engagement, but there's no, I can't feel a step at all. It's just some staining, I think, at the edge of the running area, if you like, on the base casting. So yeah, pretty good visually. And I've cleaned out the inside. We've got the worst of the muck out of there for now, and swarf and grease and everything else. And then on the top side, again, we've just given that a quick clean, just to get rid of the worst of the muck ahead of paint removal. Strangely enough, on this ram, this is the only bit where we differ from the sort of two colours, this light grey that's been put on pretty poorly, and the green, the original green that's underneath it. We've got this kind of square of dark grey there, and no idea really what the idea behind that was. Really don't know. So anyway, next job now is to get tore into paint removal. So I'm going to do that all off camera, just wire wheels to get through the paint. Nice easy area to get to as well. So I'll bring you back when we've got the paint off, and then we're doing the final clean up and assessment and masking ahead of paint. So I'm just finishing the ram off in terms of the paint strip, and what I've done with this, rather than wire wheel, is I've done this the hard way. That said, it's only taken, I don't know, about 40 minutes, something like that, but the paint on the ram has been applied much better than the paint everywhere else on the machine, and it's probably the bit that you're in contact with the most when you're operating the machine, and it's got a really nice smooth surface on it. And what I didn't want to do was gouge all that up with wire wheel marks, so that hopefully I get a better finish when we've painted it. So I'm just, as you can see, I'm just using some emery cloth, and that's really how I've done the whole thing, just going around getting the paint down. Like I say, it's a bit long-winded, but 40 odd minutes to do the whole thing is not too bad really. If I'd have been painting it with paint stripper, it would have taken equally as long. So, and I would have had all the cleanup to do. So that's about it for the ram in terms of paint strip. Next job, I'm going to start on the engineering surfaces and just clean those up with some Scotch-Brite. So we're just going to rub over the engineering surfaces on this, certainly the top, you know, and here, and the front diameter that you can't see, that's just out of shot here. And then we'll clean up and stone the slideways and inspect those, and I'll bring you back or put some still shots in when we're into the painting stage of both this and of the aluminium pieces that you've already seen. Okay, we're on to the ratchet. So we've got our two halves of the casing painted. What I've done is I've reassembled the change of direction, so left and right, depending on the direction of traverse that you want this to move in. So that all works nicely now. That's all back in there and greased up. You can see the movement hopefully in there, how that works to engage on the ratchet wheel. So what we're going to do now is start to put things back together. Now I didn't show this broken down or reassembly, apologies, but if anybody is stripping one of these down, just be really careful, because behind this piece, which is the plunger that changes the direction, underneath there is a tiny ball bearing and a tiny spring, which is basically the detent for this, so that it detents into position. So if you do strip one of these, just be really careful that you don't lose that spring and ball bearing. So what we're going to do now is start to assemble the rest of it. So we've got our main shaft. I'm just going to put a tiny bit of oil on that. Make sure that's oiled up. Now I'm not sure from memory how this came apart, if I'm honest with you, so we're guessing a bit here. I think that went through this way. Looks about right. So we're just going to get some grease now onto the double wheel. So one's just a ratchet wheel and one is a actual gear wheel. I think that was all just formed together and then relieved for the ratchet by the looks of it. So I'm going to grease this up, because this is enclosed. Once it's done, there's no way of getting oil into here on a regular basis, so we're going to give this a good coat of grease. Make sure it's well worked into the ratchet wheel more than the gear wheel, something like that, and then that should drop on there. That should now drop onto there, something like that, and then we're just going to drop that back together for now. Now I think I think one of the arms that holds this steady has to go onto here eventually, but that will do just to hold that together just for now while we get it put back onto the machine. So there we go. That's got our ratchet mechanism all cleaned up. So the next job now is to fit the lead screw back into the machine itself, so I'll join you while we're doing that, and then the gear that's on that lead screw will drop into here and mesh with that gear that we've just put back in there. So here we are looking back in at the machine. You can see we've got our ram painted, ready for refit. So that's just sat up on top of there out of harm's way for a minute, and here is the lead screw for the cross feed that we've just spoken about with the gear wheel on it. So that's what we're going to fit back to the machine next, through here, through the lead nut in the table, and then fixed in at this end. Excuse the noise in the background. Whilst the rest of the country, or a lot of the country, is still benefiting from the so-called heat wave, we've actually got torrential rain, gale force winds, and it's about 12 degrees. It's really not fair. Okay, here goes the fit up. Kind of bit of oil in both ends, in the bush, and we're going to oil the lead screw and the floor and everything else. There we go. Very nice. So the next job is to fit the ratchet housing that you've just seen me put back together onto this end. Okay, we're going to put our ratchet feed mechanism unit back onto the machine. There we go. And then we've got two cap heads to fix that in position. So there you can see how the system works. Turning the feed mechanism in both directions to move the table. So happy with that. We'll give that a wipe down, get rid of all the grease and oil, dirty finger marks, and then we will move on to this bit. Okay, on to the exciting bit. So we're going to start putting the ram assembly back together. We've got it all painted, obviously, got all the masking off. So the first one is this bevel gear and shaft, that goes through the ram for altering the position of the ram within the stroke. So that's just a simple matter through this bush, plain bearing with a retaining washer slash retaining ring on it. Okay, so next is this bronze coupling, for want of a better word, and that engages with the lever arm with the big pin. So we're going to have a look at that and see what that looks like as we put it together. So I'll just put a drop of oil in here first. There we go, that was easy. And there's a grub screw in the back that tightens up onto the pin. There's a flat on the pin. I just need to check I've got that lined up with the grub screw. I don't. I do now. Nice and easy. Okay, so next is the lead screw. So we've got that all nicely cleaned up. Okay, now we get to the semi-exciting part. So we're going to drop some oil into the slideway where the ram goes. Drop our gib strip back in. And we'll bring the ram over and see if it fits. I know I've not put the gib screws in yet, but we're just going to do a trial fit. That feels ever so nice. I know we've got no tension on there on the gib yet, but that does feel really nice in there, running on that bed of oil. Okay, we'll get the gib screws put in next, I think, and then we'll look at attaching the ram position mechanism in place, and then I've got the hardest bit to do, which is the gear underneath at the back here. That's going to be a little bit more challenging, but that's probably going to be in the next video. So we'll get the gib screws put back in for now, and we'll see where we are after that. So we've got our gib screws in, and we've roughly set those. We've got a very nice feel on the ram. Feels good. So what we're going to do now is put our two top plates on either side. I'll show you one of those going on. So we're going to start with a bit of farmed oil. Like that. And then we've got our shim stock that came off this side. And our top plate, it's all been cleaned up. It sits on the top, and then what I've also done is I've cleaned all of the bolts that hold this down, giving them a good clean up. Which has involved really filing the heads, because they were in a pretty chewed up state, and I've got no Imperial hex head bolts here, so these are cleaned up nicely. Now we tapped all the holes out in the main casting before we did the painting, so we know they're all cleaned out. Everything's going back together nicely. I'm going to use my best Imperial spanner now. Give those a light nip. Yeah, that's a good shim. I just wanted to try those shims out. I can't feel any play in that in this direction. So happy that that shim's the right shim. I thought I'd rebuild it with the existing shims, give it a bit of a trial, see what it felt like, and then if we need to make any adjustments we can, but that feels good. So I'll get the other side done the same, just give you a quick look at that, and then we'll wrap this video up. So there's our right hand side back on with the scale to set the length of stroke, and with a kind subscriber donation that's been in the workshop for some time, I'm going to pump some oil into through the Zerk fittings that I've cleaned out, which should find its way down into the oil grooves underneath the ram, and that's absolutely lovely. I wish I could describe how that feels in words, because it's absolutely silky smooth. That really does feel nice. So I'm hoping I've not fallen foul of my own stupidity here, which wouldn't be the first time and probably won't be the last. So what I've done is rebuilt this in exactly the reverse order that I took it apart, and the reason I've got limited travel at the moment on the ram, so it stops there and stops there, is because the threaded mechanism that sits in here isn't attached, and I need to attach the gear on the back end of the rod, the threaded rod that's in here that alters the position of the ram, and that's going to have to get done from underneath, knocking a pin in. Now that's how I took it off, and taking it off is obviously much easier than putting it on. There's a hole in the back of the casting to put a punch through here to knock the pin out in the shaft. Obviously I'm going to be knocking the pin back in from underneath, so worst case scenario I'll have to strip off the two plates again and do that build up off the machine, but that will be for the next video in this refurbishment series. So with all that being said, I'm really pleased with that. It's now looking properly like a shaper again. So we'll just close this video out at the board and we'll crack on with this in future episodes. Well, there we go. That gets us to the end of this episode on the Atlas 7B Shaper restoration, or Acorn Tools as I keep saying it is for me. So it's now really starting to look much more like a shaper. So that's got the ram back in position and also the cross slide all properly back together with the ratchet feed mechanism back on. So really pleased with that. It's, as I said, really starting to look like it's supposed to look now with the bits going back on it. So we'll be carrying on this series in the future with the rest of the bits and pieces that I've still got scattered all over the bench. So there's still the belt guards to do, there's still the lay shaft that fits on the back that goes between motor and gearing, and one or two other bits and pieces. There's obviously the tool slide to go on the front of the ram that we've not done yet, and I'm just looking at what bits we've got on the bench. That's probably the bulk of it. There's one or two other little bits and pieces, the door to go on the side where the gearing is and things like that. So a few more bits to go yet, but we're getting the lion's share of it done now, which is really exciting because we're getting closer to being able to, you know, have a play with it, which I'm really looking forward to. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Thank you to the subscribers, thank you to the new subscribers that have come along, and we'll catch you all very soon on another video when we'll be making something else.